water machine. When it doesn't work, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it's happened.
Needs signal.
Oh, it's getting rid of stuff. It's disgusting.
There were no cars. They hadn't invented them. They built a network of liquid highways called canals. Now they go over most of the country. The Grand Union coming down from the north. We're right at the end of the Grand Union here in London. We're going to set off and go round to the left and join a different canal. But if we were to turn the boat around and instead of going to Camden, we take you the other way, eventually we'll get you all the way to York, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, Wales, Oxford, Bristol, Bath, Guildford, from here. Notice how fast we're travelling. How long do you think any of those journeys would take? I'll give you an idea. If we took you to Birmingham, which is the other end of the Grand Union, and we go by road, we'd be there later today. If we took you to Birmingham by canal, we'll be there in about 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks just to get to Birmingham. It's a very slow form of transport. I'll explain all about it as we're moving along. But if you look over on the right side, there's an island. It's known as Browning's Island. It's named after Robert Browning, a famous English poet who lived here back in the 19th century. The island is now a little sanctuary for birds to nest safely. And as we go past Browning's Island, keep looking right, you'll see where the last bit of the Grand Union Canal goes. It just goes for a short distance, stopping just after Paddington Station. And the Grand Union, built as the main highway coming down here into London, this end opened in 1801. They built another canal a bit later. It begins at the bridge in front of us, and it's the Regent's Canal, and it takes the canal across North London, past Camden, dropping down to Limehouse Docks on the River Thames. Then it joins another set of canals that would take you on and upwards into Hertfordshire. So we're joining the Regent's Canal at this bridge. 8.5 miles away it reaches the River Thames and another set of canals. Look on the left side. The pathway is called the tow path. It's for horses. Canal boats were pulled by horses until engines were invented. The towing pathway on the left side. There's a house on the left, that's where payment was made for using the canal. Back in the old days, it's an old toll house. And you will see toll houses, maybe lock-keepers' cottages along the canals. Most of them are private homes now because the canals have changed. They were built only for industry, horses pulling the boats, and then engines came and road and railway transport took over. We still use the canals a little bit for industry. We'll see some examples of that along the way, but mostly we live on them. Look around you at our boats. Most of the boats you can see, most of them, are permanent homes for the people who live in them. Look at the shape of them. English canal boats, they're mostly this long, narrow shape. Now, the Regent's Canal that we're on, the Grand Union Canal where we started, are both much, much wider than many of our canals. A lot of our canals are really small and really narrow, and our boats must fit those canals. That's why they're built in this long, narrow shape. That's why they're called narrowboats. Please don't call them barges. Please don't call them houseboats. They're neither of those things. And the narrowboats you're looking at are modern. They've been built as homes for people to live in. A proper working narrowboat, and you are sitting inside one, by the way, a proper working narrowboat would carry cargo and goods. So a proper working narrowboat, almost the entire boat would be one huge cargo hold. And at the back of a working narrowboat, you'll find a very small cabin, less than 10 by 6 feet, and that's where an entire family had to live back in the old days. Now look at these modern boats either side, and you can see that today we use all of the boat as a home. We have tallow gas for cooking in our kitchens, coal and wood stoves to keep warm, water tanks with fresh water for showers and toilets, Toilets are emptied at pump-out stations, never ever into the canals. We have engines now instead of a horse. That's an old lifeboat, by the way. It's not a narrowboat. We have engines instead of a horse. Engines make electricity. All those modern electric items you have at home, we can have in our boats. We can undo our ropes, we can travel, we can take our homes with us. There's more than 23,000 of us living on the canals. But you're looking at modern narrowboats. None of those boats were here back in the old days, but the boat you're sitting inside is a proper and very special old working narrowboat, and it is called Jason. This boat, Jason, was built in 1906. It was pulled by a horse, and you guys are sitting in the cargo hold. This whole area we have with the chairs is the cargo hold. We can put 30 tons in here. Behind me at the back is a very small cabin, and that's where the family had to live. Now this is quite a special boat. It is an iron and wood composite build, and there are very few of these left. There are quite a lot of old boats still on the canals, but Jason is 115 years old now, and it's one of the oldest. And it's still working. We still carry cargo. The cargo is you. Now we don't own this boat, we're just workers, but we're very proud to look after such a beautiful historic working narrowboat. We don't have a horse pulling Jason along anymore, we've got an engine. And we're going to go through a tunnel. Ahead of us is the Maiden Hill. The canal goes through the hill with a tunnel 272 yards long. There is no pathway through the tunnel for horses to walk and pull the boats. Now what they had to do back in the old days, the horse can't walk through the tunnel, no tow path. So, approaching the tunnel, the horse would be untied. Someone would take the horse over the top of the hill. To get the boat through the tunnel, they pushed them through with their feet. Now, I want you to use your imaginations. Listen carefully on this bit, it's a bit complicated. Look at the front of our boat, and there's a coil of rope. Two people would go onto the front of the boat, they'd lie down on their backs, one person on the left with their legs outwards, one person on the right with their legs outwards, and then they pushed along the side walls of the tunnel with their feet to keep the boat moving. And it was called legging or walking a boat through a tunnel. I'm going to actually come and show you a picture before it goes all dark, because we don't have too many people on board. Now to reach the side walls, because I wouldn't reach the side walls if I was lying on the front of the boat, they put a plank of wood across the front of the boat first. So there'd be a plank of wood across the front here. So there'd be a plank of wood across the front, plank of wood sticking out each side. People, one each side, lying on their back, legs outwards, walking it along the side walls, like that. So that is how you would leg a boat through a tunnel. And this is only 272 yards long. There are tunnels that are 2 miles long. The longest tunnel in the country up at Standage is 3.2 miles. And that's how they did it. Now if the tunnel had a lower ceiling, they could lie on the cabin roof, put their feet up and do it that way. Depends on the tunnel, they're all different. Right, quickly before it all goes dark, have a look at these. See what they're doing? Simple and effective, but hard work, of course. this goes, there's a little boat in front of us. It's decided to stop. Thank you. You try to keeping a 20-ton boat in the middle of the tunnel. The guy who's steering our boat for us today is very, very experienced, but situations like this absolutely drive us nuts. The people in the little boat in front of us have got no idea what they're doing. They've been given 5 minutes instruction on how to use that boat, and then they're sent down onto a major waterway. Like this, so we top one behind. To the old days, of course, getting to the end of the tunnel and could stop legging into the boat. Actually, there would be people waiting at the entrance of the tunnel just to leg the boats through. If there were boats waiting a bit, they'd leg the other way, they've got to pay for it. And the horse would be waiting on the towpath left side, going to continue with 1 horsepower. You only need 1 horse to pull the boat like ours. The boat weighs 20 tons. We can put another 30 tons in there. But they've got kids on there, for goodness sake. You can put 30 tons in here. I can pull this boat on my own. I do it every day. It's the water that takes the weight and does most of the work for you. And that's why water transport is so efficient. But then engines came. Road and railway transport was much faster than this. They stopped using canals. They started filling them in. We nearly lost them. But we can still see where horses' ropes rubbed into the edges of the bridges, and I'm going to show you rope markings on the next bridge, but I'd like you to look at the bridge now, and I'll tell you where to look when we get there. Look at the bridge, follow the arch to the left side, and there's some white paint. When we get there, look at the corner of the bridge from the white paint down to the ground. There is a bit of metal embedded in the brickwork with smooth grooves worn into it, where horses' ropes constantly rubbed against the edge of the bridge. There'll be rope markings at the other end of the bridge as well. So as we come into the bridge, it's the left edge of the bridge, from the white paint down to the ground. The gate and the railings were not here back in the old days, they would be in the way, and the horse was about 20 yards ahead of us. And we've got another boat sitting right in front of us now as well. So the rope marks at this end would be made by boats going the opposite way. The rope marks at the other end of the bridge would be made by boats travelling in this direction. So if the horse was 20 yards ahead of us, it would have walked out of the bridge by now and around to the left. The rope would be dragging into the left corner of the bridge. Hundreds of boats moving around our canals, pulled by horses, and we can still see the rope markings on all of our bridges. As we come out of the bridge, you see there is an orange barrier leading up against the inside wall of the bridge. The road marks are behind that. So when we get there, you need to turn your heads. With the ground up for about 3 were built along the canals. And if you look up on the left, there's a power station. It was built here so coal could be brought by canal. The coal was then made into electricity by burning it in big furnaces. We don't do that in London anymore because of pollution. It's become a storage power station. Behind the power station is a very famous cricket ground. It's called Lord's. Lord's Cricket Ground is not where it used to be. Lord's Cricket Ground used to be here, where we are now. They had to move it when they built the Regent's Canal. It's actually in its third location. Looking at the boats over there, you know now that they're called narrow boats. You can see that they're modern, again, people's homes. We can travel with our boats whenever we want to. If you pay rent to keep your boat on a space like these people do, then nobody can take that space when you move away. When you're travelling and you want to stop somewhere different, you must look for visitor moorings. You can stay on those for short amounts of time only, and then you have to keep moving on. Now the narrow boats along here, at the moment, they're all bunched up together. There's usually a bit of a space between them. They're all bunched up together because right down the far end, we'll see it in a moment or two, they're doing some maintenance work on the towpath, so they've bunched all the boats up. But I want you to look at the wall behind the boats. Because they're all bunched up, it's not quite so easy to see, but I want you to keep looking at that wall until you see arch-shaped markings. There were tunnels all the way down that wall. They're bricked up now, no longer used, but that's where they unloaded coal into the power station. Empty boats took away the waste from the burnt coal. Ash, clinker, it was recycled for brick making and for road surface. Almost everything back in those days could be recycled. How the world has changed, eh? In the last of the tunnels, right back down the far end where the machinery is, they kept horses. 200 horses were kept down there, and the boating families, most of them didn't own a horse, they hired them as they moved along. Part of Camden Market is where they kept horses, now called the Stables Market. The families had to live in the cabin at the back of the boat, no bigger than a large cupboard. Children, babies, children would be working by 4 or 5 years old, no school. Even into the 1960s, many canal families could still not read or write. We still have people who carry cargo on old working boats just as they used to. Now have a look at what's going on here, because it is actually quite interesting. They're doing some maintenance work, but they're bringing in lots of really old boats to carry the machinery. Now, you see the white cabins sitting in that boat. Were any of you in London last Monday when we had a bit of rain? Yeah? Well, it was quite a lot of rain, and we came out on Tuesday morning. Now, those cabins were still sitting in that boat, but the boat was at the bottom of the canal. And they've taken all week to get them up again and bring in even bigger machinery in. And if you look at Mick's tug, his name is Mick. See the little cabin? Yeah, that is about the same size as a boatman's cabin where an entire family had to live. And you see this boat behind him, this big metal boat. It's called a hopper. Beautiful old boats, and this is a really good example of using the canals for what they were intended, bringing building materials in, taking waste, bringing in machinery, much more efficient than using the roads. And those old hoppers would have been pulled by a horse originally, but now they're pushed around by boats. Back in the day, the canals were the main highways. Everything we now put on road or rail would have gone by canal. Building materials still carried, coal, waste products, fruit, vegetables from farms into the towns, raw materials like clay, coal, limestone going to the big potteries industries. There were things coming from all over the world, brought by ships into the ports, put onto canal boats, taken to factories for processing. Tea, coffee, spices, paper, cotton, rubber, fruit juice from the Mediterranean going to the fruit juice factories, Robinsons. Cocoa powder, sugar cane coming from the West Indies going to the chocolate factories. Blocks of ice that we imported from Norway before we had fridges. Military items during different wars. It was after the Second World War that canals went into decline. Early 1960s they shut the canals down and the canal people lost their way of life. Boats like Jason were scrapped. They started putting canals in. Now things obviously changed, but I want you to look at this boat first. It's our rival company. That's also an old work boat turned into a passenger boat, except they've got wheels. beautiful. Now look at the cabin at the back there, that's really lovely canal artwork. And now look up on the right. Look up on the right side. We're on the north side of Regent's Park. These houses along here, there are 7 of them. We can see 2 of them very clearly. They're new. They've been built more than 100 years after the rest of Regent's Park. Regent's Park was built in the early 1800s. John Nash designed Regent's Park, famous architect. He didn't design those. They're modern, but they've been designed in the style of sort of John Nash houses. So they're being keeping with the rest of Regent's Park. Now we can't see the next 2 or 3 of them, they're behind the trees. Look on the other side, private garden, one of the largest in central London. If you're walking around the roads, you would not see these gardens. They're hidden behind brick walls. If you were walking along the road up there, on the left, Prince Albert Road, all you would see is a big brick wall. Down here on the canal, we can look at this garden every single day. There is a house that goes with it, but we can't see that house from where we are. There is a building up there. It's a block of flats in St John's Wood. It has nothing to do with the garden. It's a very beautiful garden actually, and it looks absolutely stunning. The only people we ever see in the garden. Now coming round the corner, on the other side again, we've got the last one of the new houses. This is the Regency Villa. It's just over 16 years old now. How much do you think one of those would cost? You may well shake your heads. They've been going up. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 million. One of them sold for £130 million last year. And we wonder why the world is going mad. Now back to the canal. This is man-made. Every canal is man-made. In this country, mostly Irish migrants built them. 200 years ago, they didn't have machinery like we do today, but they built 4,000 miles of them by hand. Think about that. All of this was dug by hand, building towpaths, bridges, tunnels, locks, aqueducts. Not much more than shovels and pickaxes. An amazing achievement of engineering. The Irish workers were known as navigation engineers, shortened to the word navvy that we still use today for people who build and maintain highways. Today, Canal and River Trust are supposed to be looking after our canals. They're not doing a very good job of it, I'm afraid. This is less than 6 feet deep. People throw a lot of rubbish into our waterways, a lot, and what you can't see down there will be supermarket trolleys, car tyres, stolen motorbikes, bicycles, fridges, cookers, mattresses, old garden fences, you name it, it's down there. And if it is not taken out, eventually the canal will fill up with rubbish. We will not be able to go anywhere, we won't be able to move. The vegetation has to be cut back. It hasn't been cut back for ages now. And the water has to be put in. It's not a natural waterway. It's pumped in from rivers and reservoirs. And if you look over at the towpath, the level has already gone down about 5-6 inches, and it is only 6 feet, less than 6 feet deep. If they do not top the water up, boats like ours will not be able to operate. No more Jason Strip. This is our friend. So yes, it is happening. I'm not really sure how it's going to end up or what we can do about it, but it's basically 1960s all over again. Looking ahead, we can see the most famous bridge along here, and it's known as, well, it's called Macclesfield Bridge, but we call it something else. Now, back in 1874, a boat with some cargo of gunpowder passed under the bridge, gunpowder exploded, whole bridge came down. Now, the iron columns were put back up. They rebuilt the top. 2 of those columns got turned round, so they've ended up with road markings on both sides, which would be impossible had something not happened to the bridge. So look at the first column on the left. Down the bottom of the column, near the blue paint, I'm sorry, but there's been a lot of graffiti artists for that. This is quite recent and stuff. There are road marks down the bottom of the first column on the left and on the last column on the left. And those 2 columns But this was like the motorway coming through London. It was a very important highway. They had to rebuild Macclesfield for it as quickly as possible, and they managed that in just a few days. Ever since then, everyone knows it as Blow Up Bridge. Good look around you, everybody. Now, I don't know where you guys have come from, whether you're Londoners or you're visiting, but have a good look around you and remember where you are, and that you could walk to Oxford Street in less than 20 minutes. There's a main road only a few yards away. We're completely surrounded for miles and miles with roads, buildings, houses, traffic. We're travelling at top speed, looking at wildlife. We're right in the heart of London. Isn't this beautiful? Now, a lot of the water birds are hatching chicks at this time of year. There's lots of fish down there in the water. There are no more horses on our canal tow paths, and some of them have been opened up to the public and can now be used for walking dogs, jogging, and fishing. We're going to go through a little bit of London Zoo. I'm sorry we're not going to see much of the animals from down here. The bushes are too thick. It's one of the oldest in the world. 1828 it first opened. It was only open for the local rich people to start with. It was another 20 years before it was opened to the general public. And today it's a very important institution for education and conservation. A lot of animals will be on international breeding programs to help protect endangered species. So as we come into the zoo, two enclosures on the right. The first one has two warthogs living in there. We're not going to see them unless they're actually walking around by the fence. Sometimes we see them. Warthogs, they're an African bush pig. The next enclosure, let's see if the dogs are out. The next enclosure has a family of African hunting dogs. They're beautiful animals, really beautiful. Out in Africa, they're now very rare because they've been shot and poisoned and their habitat has been taken. And they have to breed in zoos now as they are on the seriously endangered list. We may or may not see them. What you're looking out for is a large dog, tortoiseshell. But I'm going to tell you about the structure that's going on the other side, on the left. Now this is quite interesting. It's Snowdon Aviary, built in the early 60s, designed by Lord Snowdon, the Queen's brother-in-law. People hated it, it was too modern looking. Now if you look at the aviary itself, not the scaffolding, it's a very odd shape, very difficult to maintain or repair. Over the years it became impossible and it became useless as an aviary. There's the dogs on the other side, one of them, two of them. So eventually the aviary was of no use. However, somebody had made it a grade 2 listed building. They couldn't pull it down. And because they can't pull it down, they've got to redesign it. It's being turned into some kind of primate enclosure in the next couple of years. The work on the aviary is now a year and a half late. Poor old London Zoo, struggling like we all are, having been shut for most of that time. They're in serious financial difficulty, and if you want to help London Zoo, you can either go and visit or you can just donate directly. Now there's a picture of one of the African hunting dogs on the right. It's on a blue board, about the size of an Alsatian, beautiful colouring. Now I mentioned we were travelling at top speed. We're not allowed to go faster than 4 miles an hour. Do you know where our driver is, by the way? Where's our driver? Is there anyone driving this boat? Is it Maggie? At the back? Yeah. You steer a narrowboat from the back. That's where the engine room and controls are. We have Andy with us today. He's right at the back. He's going a bit too fast. He's going to slow down. Right. Now, there we go. We have been working together for some time. Now the reason he slowed down, he can see that there are boats ahead, they're moored on the right where people live. If we were still doing 4 miles an hour, even from this distance we would damage those boats, break their ropes. It's very, very unpopular. Always come right down to this speed when you go past moored boats. If you want to travel on our canals, you can hire narrowboats for holidays. This is the speed you will be travelling at for quite a lot of the time. Now we have noticed that the canals are getting slower. There are locks to get through. Locks take time. They're always there. They're part of the canal. I mean, you can walk faster than a canal boat travels. You can't carry 30 tons with you there. Also, there's a lot of more people living on the canals, and we have to slow down when we go past their boats. The other, more dangerous aspect is the amount of people, especially during the lockdown, have decided to go and buy inflatables. And I mean really silly little inflatables that you would give your children to go and play with on the beach, and they're putting them on the canal. It's a bit like like sending your children into the motorway or the shipping lane. They are incredibly dangerous. They have no idea what danger they are putting themselves and ourselves into. And again, it's something that nobody's doing anything about. The boats that we're moving past, we're going slowly, so we don't damage them. Again, they're paying rent to keep their boats there. They can move when they want to. And ahead of us, if you look straight ahead, you'll see the top of a Chinese-style building, a floating Chinese restaurant. The Regent's Canal turns left, and we have to follow it to the left. We can't take you straight on. The canal that should be there has gone. There was a canal going straight on from here to King's Cross. It was servicing a big fruit and vegetable market and a depot where they kept food for horses. And then, of course, after the Second World War, they started filling canals in. The canal that went straight on here was filled in, but then it was built over with houses and streets, and it could never be reopened. Now, Andy is going to swing the front of Jason across the corner. And if you keep looking over to the right, you'll see no more canal, just a dead end. And you'll see the Feng Shan Princess, the floating Chinese restaurant. We're turning into the Primrose Hill area. The church on the left is known as St Mark's Church of Primrose Hill. Primrose Hill is behind the church. Now we've got a little bridge in front of us. I'm going to go back to rope markings for a moment, and you can tell that this is an older bridge. Rope marks will be on the towpath side of the bridge. So if you look through the graffiti, on the left corners of the bridge, on each corner there's a strip of metal with rope marks. And the strips of metal will put there as protection, and it wouldn't take long for ropes to wear all the way through strips of metal. And then they just replaced the strip of metal rather than making major and more expensive repairs on the brickwork. Now the boats along this section, on the left, on the towpath, all of the boats along here on the towpath are using visitor moorings. Now that means all of the boats over there on the left are moving, they're on the move somewhere, they're travelling, and they can stay for a certain amount of time on these moorings, and then they have to keep moving. There's another London Water bus coming towards us. It will come past on the left side. Again, an old working boat turned into a passenger boat. That's Andrew with the back, giving me a little wave. Remember, only half of that cabin was for the family back in the day. There are two different sides to our canals. The towpath is usually on one side only. There's no need for it to be on both. The opposite side is the offside. The offside is usually private property, no pathway for horses. Very attractive gardens along here on the offside, and very expensive houses, although not as much as the ones in Regent's Park. A few £1,000,000 each though. We're quite close to Camden now, and it becomes more industrial again. Camden was an industrial area. It developed around the canal. We're going under some bridges. Now, the two bridges in front of us are square trade, and that tells us they carry railway lines. There were no railway lines here when the canal was built. They haven't invented them. We went under railway lines further back on the strip just along the power station. And the railway lines back there, with the Chiltern and the Metropolitan lines, above us here, the railway lines are going to the Livingston station. It was specially built in the early 70s. It was funded by local charities. The children at the time helped raise the money to build it. And over on the right there are two narrowboats, and one's a wider one. They're both used for taking children for day trips and longer holidays. One of the boats has been recently built. It was designed by them. It's got wheelchair access. They do a lot of work with special needs people. Over there, kayaks and canoes. Now, I said earlier about people putting unsuitable craft on the canal. This is an organised group. The Pirate Club, when they come out with their canoes, they're supervised, they're licensed, they always get the children right out of the way and keep them safe when we're coming through, and that's absolutely fine. There are quite a lot of activity centres along the canals. Do it with a group, do it safely, never ever put your own vessel on the canal. It is just too dangerous. And here we are, we're arriving in Camden, and we'll have factories and warehouses on both sides. All of them built into this canal. And if you look over on the right-hand side, there's a big old white factory. And on the left-hand side, there's a big old brick factory. Both of them were owned by the distilling company. They don't exist now, but they were called Gilbys. They were famous for gin. There was a brewery, a jam factory, a timber merchants, an ice house where they stored ice, and then engines came and road and railway transport took over. The industries moved away, the factories have been turned into flats, offices and studios, and Camden has become famous for the markets. Now we're going to be stopping here. The Regent's Canal continues for 6 miles yet before getting to the next set of canals and the River Thames. From here onwards it starts to drop. Now ahead of us there's a bridge going over the canal. It was built for horses, by the way, not for people. And just after that we get locks. 12 locks carry the canal 85 feet down to the river. It's about up to here. There's an old tunnel like the ones at the power station. This one hasn't been broken up, it's still very much in use. And we're not going through the locks, we don't have time. Over on the left there's a man with a little wooden boat who's going to go back to our way. We're going to wind or turn Jason round, we're going to stop over there. When you turn a narrowboat, you say that you're winding the boat. We can't do that unless we have enough room. You cannot turn 72 foot of boat around in a normal width of the canal. Now I want you to look immediately to our left, immediately over to the left. Can you see horizontal cut marks in the brickwork going up to the horse bridge? The man with his light blue t-shirt now, there's a little, two people coming down, two girls, yeah? Watch where they're walking. Can you see those horizontal cut marks? You know what made them, don't you? They're all rope marks. In fact, there are rope marks on the underside of the horse bridge up there on the left. A bit difficult to see because the sun's shining. position to see the locks. There are two of them. About a 10-foot drop on the other side, another lock, another drop straight up, then another and another. There are hundreds of these locks along our canals, and we do the locks ourselves. If you're going to spend some time here, you will see boats going up and down through those locks. But if I can have your attention, as this is the end of our journey, and if you look around, you can see it's quite busy. Not as busy as it was sort of pre-pandemic, but it's still quite busy. If you're still concerned about any COVID issues, then wear your face coverings. 2 underground stations, just 5 minutes away. When you get off, go and explore the stables market. It's the most interesting area. Go and look at the locks if there are boats going up and down. Please, all of you, be careful with your bags and your possessions at camping. Now, as we pull up alongside, I'm going to jump off and get the boat tied up.